Hello, and thanks for watching again. This will be the September podcast. Kind of the last day of September, so I figured I'd better get it in. So we got a podcast for every month. Not a lot to talk about because there's not a lot been really going on. The COVID problem kind of ended, and then with the Delta coming back, here we go again with a lot of our field classes shutting down. And so things have kind of slowed back down again, but hang in there. We'll get through this with the vaccines. We'll get through this. Had a person stop by the other day and talk about AEDs. And if you remember in one of my previous podcasts, I talked kind of extensive about AEDs, and they brought up an interesting question, which really wasn't covered in my other podcast. And so I'm going to talk about it this time. But remember, right now, go on and hit your like button and then hit the subscribe button. Remember, by hitting the like button and subscribe button, when we post these podcasts, as soon as I put it up online, you get a notification that a new podcast is up and ready to watch. So we don't have to rely so heavily on sending out a newsletter to follow up on it, okay? So with that said, again, our newsletter will be coming out shortly. And in the newsletter, again, it will remind everybody that by January 1, we want every one of our instructors to be vaccinated. Okay, I'm getting ready to go for my third shot. I've got it planned to do this coming Saturday because I figure some folks aren't feeling very good the next day. I did not have a problem with either of my two shots, so I'm not really anticipating a problem. But I figure if I get it on a Saturday, if I don't feel good Sunday, that's okay. And then Monday, I'm back to work. So that's my timing of what I'm anticipating. Although I'm not really looking forward to having any problems whatsoever since I didn't have it with the other two. So, such is life. Anyway, the question that came up was twofold. One, how come, and this has come up a couple times with the AED and stuff, do you put the AED on right away? Should you do 2 minutes worth of CPR before you put the AED on? How do you judge that? Okay, so you know me, I'm kind of a storyteller. And so years ago, when we were first bringing the AEDs into the world, and people were just beginning to use them, we were going around showing the doctors what they were, how to use them, what they're all about. The question came up about defibrillating a deoxygenated heart. And any of the folks out in the field that do CPR or actually shock a patient know that if you shock a patient and the heart has not really been properly oxygenated yet, that you go from a ventricular fib, a coarse fib, and on your first shock, classically they go into flatline or asystole, and then it is a bear trying to get them back into a coarse fib again. So with that said, early on when AEDs were first kind of coming into the market, we stressed the possibility that you have to do at least 2 minutes of CPR before you put the AED on the patient. Well, that kind of became the rule early on that, the AED's there, make sure you do 2 minutes of CPR. And then it kind of dawned on people that, you're not walking the hallways carrying your AED with you everywhere you go. So that when a person goes down and you initiate CPR, you say to the person, go call 911 and bring an AED back. Well, it's probably going to be at least 2 minutes before that AED ever gets back to the patient. So at least 2 minutes or more of CPR will already have been done on that patient, so the heart muscle will be reoxygenated from your CPR before the AED is actually placed on the patient gets shocked. So with that said, we kind of dropped the concept of got to do 2 minutes. So that's where the 2 minutes came from. It came from trying to reoxygenate the heart muscle itself before we shocked them with an AED. And it kind of fell by the wayside. So keep that kind of in the back of your mind. In most cases, the 2 minutes of CPR will already be done long before that AED shows up to use on the patient. So that's where that came from. Not really an issue anymore. But I thought that was an interesting question. And it kind of like it throws us back to the early days of when AEDs were first being rolled out here in Maryland, actually across the United States. How we used them and some of the issues that we worried about. Okay? So the other question that popped up too, just the other day was, and this has been answered before, but once again, how come for an adult when they hit the ground, you literally call 911 first and then do CPR, and on a child or infant, you literally do CPR first for 2 minutes or 5 cycles, and then call 911. And actually, the answer is pretty straightforward. For the adult, when they hit the ground, we know the importance of an AED to countershock the patient. So we literally want to get that AED en route to us or a paramedic unit carrying the capabilities of defibbing that patient right off the bat. So that's so important. But for a child and infant, when they go down, first of all, it is very unlikely when a pediatric goes down that, number one, it's even heart involved. Usually it's a choking scenario, more so than cardiac. But if it is cardiac involved, they usually are not in a shockable rhythm. Most pediatrics, child and infant, when they go into cardiac issues, they go into asystole, which is not a shockable rhythm. So they really do need CPR more so than countershock early on, where the adult really needs countershock first and not and where the peds need the CPR first. So hopefully that answered your question. Hopefully that will kind of make sense to you. And again, remember, for pediatric, the odds are it's not cardiac. The odds are it's a choking scenario. You'll find that out early on as you begin to get into that, try to ventilate them. Solve the choking problem, and you got a really good chance of getting the pediatric right straight back again. So that's the logic of the odds of why we do what we do. And that was two really good questions that came in this past month and asked to be put into podcast. So that was neat. It is working. So again, if you got questions, comments, thoughts, please let us know. We will put it into the next podcast coming in. Let's see what else. That's, I guess, pretty much everything. So again, thanks for watching. Happy September, even though we're pretty much at the end of it. And see you again in October. Please get those cards and letters coming in, what you want to talk about. Thanks again.